Here's a record that I find astounding that's still a record from the past, and that's most passing yards in a single game. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm Ernie Jennings, your host, and in this episode we do another look at some aspects of statistics outside of looking at each individual team, which is what I've been doing for quite a while now. Been in the NFC, just started the NFC, in fact, but we'll pick that back up in the next podcast. But in this episode, I'm going to look at some of the oldest NFL records that we have, and I'm going to do it in a variety of ways. Some I'll do a little bit more background, and others it'll be more of just looking at the stats and comparing them to players today in various ways. Some of them are interesting in other aspects as well, which I might do in another podcast about some records, NFL records that will they ever get broken? And we'll look at some and we'll compare which ones we think, even though they're old, have been around for a while, or maybe not that old, but some people think they're unbreakable. We'll decide, are they truly unbreakable, or is it possible that someday somebody will break the record? But that'll be another podcast. But in this one, there could be a little bit of overlay, I guess, with some of these and that podcast, and possibly anyway. But we'll look at that in another time. So in this one, we'll start off with the most points in a single game, which, depending on who you're looking at, it could be a variety of people, but the one that is considered the game was by Ernie Nevers in November 28, 1929, 96 years ago, playing for the Chicago Cardinals versus the Chicago Bears. And in that game, Ernie Nevers scored 40 points, NFL record. Scored 6 touchdowns, which ties him for the most touchdowns in a single game. But the difference was he also kicked the field goal, or not the field goals, I'm sorry, the extra points. So he had 4 extra points as well, which is how he got to 40. So a little bit different. So a little background on this game. Like I said, it was the Chicago Cardinals versus the Chicago Bears. Chicago Cardinals just had a difficult time in Chicago because the Bears were just a much more popular team. And even though in this game the Cardinals do beat the Bears end up winning the division by the end of the year. They battled for supremacy in the NFL's Western Division at the time. The game was held at Kaminsky Park in Chicago, famous baseball place. It was very muddy, rain-soaked field at Kaminsky Park in this game where Ernie Nevers scored 40 points. So like I said, he had 6 touchdowns for 36 points, and he had 4 extra points for 4 points. He scored every point that the team had, and in fact, no other player scored in the game. There were a couple field goals, but that was it. This is like I said, this is a record that still stands today, so it's been a long time. There's only one other player that scored 6 touchdowns in a game, and that's Alvin Kamara, who did it in 2020. So it took that long for anybody else to have 6 touchdowns. Like I said, the difference between the two is just that he added those extra points. And the reason it's contested a little bit is that it was 1929, and there's still a little bit of difficulty in verifying. At times, some accept it, some don't, verifying the statistics on a game basis before 1933. This game was in 1929, but it is an NFL record. Ernie Nevers made it to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So he was quite a player at the time. And as a Jaguar fan, we have Travis Hunter running around playing offense and defense. This was much more common back then. In fact, Ernie Nevers was a running back and a fullback, in fact. He played linebacker on defense. He called all the plays. He handled all the kicking duties, not just the extra points, but the field goals, the kickoffs, everything. So basically, he was on the field every single minute of the game. Very incredible. Not the only player like that. We'll see the next one with Sammy Baugh, very similar. But Ernie Nevers in that game, like I said, had 40 points. That is the NFL record. Now, another record, a little bit offbeat, I suppose, somewhat, is the highest average gain passing in a game. You had to have at least minimum of 20 passes. The record is 18.6 yards per attempt, which is quite a bit, set by Slingin' Sammy Baugh in 1948. This is in a single game now. So this was in October 31st of 1948. So here's a record 77 years ago. He was playing for the Washington Redskins against the Boston Yanks. The Washington ended up winning the game 59-21. So he only threw 24. He had 24 attempts, had 17 completions, and like I said, it was 18.6 yards per attempt. He threw for 446 yards in that game with 4 TDs. Now, this record he's held for quite a long time, as I said. A little bit about Sammy Baugh, Slingin' Sammy Baugh, as he got nicknamed. He began his career in 1937 with the Washington Redskins. And here's another person. He played quarterback, he played safety, and he was a punter. So he's a Hall of Famer, and easily a Hall of Famer. He led the NFL in passing completions 6 times, completion percentage 8 times. And here's what's so fascinating about him. Punting 5 times. So very versatile player. The only other player currently in the top 25 in this category is Lamar Jackson, who is on the list twice. The first, well, not the first, but in December 31st of 2023, he had 15.3 yards per attempt in his game that he played there. That's best for 19th in the top 25. So he also finished 6th. This was back on September 8th, 2019. He had a 16.2 yards per attempt average. So that's good enough to finish 6th. And like I said, Sammy Baugh had an 18.6. So a little bit off, but no one's really come close to this record. I don't know. I think it's a record that possibly could be broken. It's very situational type of thing, and I think it is a possibility that it could be broken. Now, what I liked about Sammy Baugh is when you look at him, he held until just 2022, that also had the record for the season in a single season punting average record of 51.4 yards, which was he set in 1940. It took 82 years for that record to be broken, but Ryan Stonehouse broke the record in 2022 by averaging 53.1 yards per attempt. So you can see record couldn't last a long time, but somebody comes along and can break it. Here's a record that I find astounding that's still a record from the past, and that's most passing yards in a single game. This is held by Norm Van Brocklin. He played for the Los Angeles Rams. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. But this was in a game in September 28th, 1951, so that's 74 years ago. In that game, he passed for 554 yards. That's the most yardage in a single game, which I find astounding, just by the fact that with the passing game today, you just think that's something that could be broken. But so far, no one's eclipsed that record. He threw 27 completions on 41 attempts for his 554 yards. He had 5 TDs. He actually threw 2 interceptions as well. And here's another player. He punted 4 times for a 40-yard average in the game. So these guys were incredible back then in playing. I do think this is a record that can be broken. In fact, Matt Schaub, Warren Moon, both got close. Kirk Cousins had over 500 yards passing just last season, shortly before he was benched. But he did throw for over 500, so it's a possibility. Now, these interception records, like we'll talk about, not in exact order, but we'll talk about this one first. Most interceptions in a single season. That's held by Night Train Lane from the Los Angeles Rams in 1952. He had 14 interceptions in a single season, returned 2 of them for TDs. That is a record by one over 3 other players, one of them being Lester Hayes from 1980. And I only mention that because 1980 is the most recent person on this list. The other 2 that Lester Hayes is tied with, they're from 1948 and 1950. So it took 30 years for, we'll say 28 years for Lester Hayes to get within 1 of the record. So it's a tough one. Now, this interesting fact about Night Train Lane was that he had no professional football resume. He walked right into the Rams front office in 1952 and got a free agent contract and tried out for a receiver first, but didn't make that spot on the team. But he was able to switch over to defensive back during training camp. And this is not only is this the record, he was a rookie when he did it. So a crazy stat here. And one other fact about this is in 1952 when there were only 12 games in a season. So he had 14 interceptions in 12 games. So we play 17 currently, and the best this past season was Joseph. He had 9 in 17 games. So you would think more games, there's a possibility that the record could get broken. A little bit about Night Train Lane and why you can see why this may not, this record may not get broken. And I'll tell you, but first of all, he had back-to-back 3 interception games. He had 3 interceptions against the Green Bay Packers, 1 for an 80-yard touchdown return, and he had another 3 the next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which also included a 42-yard pick 6. So very impressive. But one of the things that makes this difficult nowadays is some of the tactics that the defensive players could use back then. And Night Train Lane was known for, he had another nickname, which was Night Train Necktie, because he did the clothesline tackle, something you can't do today. Part of his physical style led to rules banning head and neck tackles, and also grabbing the face mask. That was one of his techniques for pulling somebody down. So you ran into his area, you were looking to get hurt. So some of his tactics that got him to the 14 interceptions got banned after a period of time. All right, now these next couple of stats are a little bit different, and I won't go so much into the character of the people necessarily, but just into the idea of it. So here's one. The most passing TDs in a single game is 7. Now, what's interesting about it, it's been done 8 times. The most recent time was Drew Brees for the New Orleans Saints in 2015, November 1st, 2015, against the New York Giants. He had 7 touchdowns passes. Then you can go through, you have Nick Foles. Peyton Manning had 7 in 2013. Then it drops way. You had 3 players, 2015, 2, in fact, was kind of crazy. Nick Foles and Peyton Manning in 2013 each threw for 7 touchdowns in different days. But different games, but 2 in the same season is incredible when you have a total of 8 people that have ever done it, period. But after 2013, it drops all the way to 1969 with Joe Kapp had 7 for Minnesota. And the last one, or the farthest away, which is why I kind of include this, is Sid Luckman for the Chicago Bears against the New York Giants in November 14th of 1943, had 7. So in a way, this record was set initially in 1943 and it's never been broken. It's been tied 7 times, but not broken. So fascinating record that so many people have made it to 7, but no one's quite made it to 8. I watched the game with Drew Brees when he had the 7 interceptions. I think it was Eli Manning, if I'm not mistaken, threw 6. So they had 13 passing TDs in a single game. That was a crazy game to watch. I mean, they each would get on the field and throw another touchdown pass. It was amazing. So that is an interesting record. Now, here's another one. Most receiving TDs in a single season. And again, this is one where I'm comparing people, not so current, but still famous player everybody knows, Jerry Rice, along with 2 others, had 5 receiving TDs in a single season. Jerry Rice did it on October 14th, 1990 against the Atlanta Falcons. So the last time it was done was in 1990, which obviously is 35 years ago. So quite a while back. Prior to him, Kellen Winslow had 5 playing for the San Diego Chargers against the Oakland Raiders in November 22nd, 1981. And then the first time somebody had 5 TDs in a single season was Bob Shaw had 5 playing for the Chicago Cardinals versus the Baltimore Colts in October 2nd, 1950. So this has been a record now for 75 years, still not broken, tied twice, but that's it. And again, here's a record I think can be broken. Chase had 17 this past season. He didn't have 5 in a game, but you have 17 touchdowns. There's a possibility that you could get 5. You're obviously getting the ball thrown in your direction enough that it's a possibility. But anyway, we'll see if that ever does get broken. And I like these records because these are records that have been tied. They've been around for a long time. As I said, Sid Luckman for the passing TDs in a single game from 1943. You know, you're talking 82 years ago, and it's still a record, but it was tied 7 times. So you would think there's a possibility in that one somebody could get 8. And the same with the receiving TDs. Somebody could get 6 someday. Though only 3 people have hit the 5 mark. So not as likely, I guess, as throwing 8 touchdowns as it is receiving 6 of those. So, which, by the way, if somebody's throwing 8 touchdowns, maybe one of those guys is going to get 6 of them. That's a possibility. All right, let's look at most interceptions in a single game. So we had Night Train Lane had the most interceptions in a single season. In a single game, this is another one that's really interesting. You've got 20 people have had 4 interceptions in a single game. Never been broken. So no one's ever got to 5 in a single game, but 20 people have had 4. The most recent one was in 2010. D'Angelo Hall for Washington Redskins versus Chicago Bears had 4 interceptions. He picked off the quarterback 4 times, just in case you're wondering which way I'm going with this. But only twice in the 21st century, Deltha O'Neal playing for the Denver Broncos against the Kansas City Chiefs had 4. And this was in October 7, 2001. So only twice it's been done in the last 25 years. And then you go through, like I said, there was 20 players. It drops drastically one time in the 1990s, once in the 1980s, twice in the 1970s, and then it picks up after that. You have more per season. But the first person to do it was Sammy Baugh again, not only was he throwing touchdown passes and setting records throwing the ball or kicking or punting. He was quite an amazing player, but he had 4 interceptions in the single game and was the first person to do it. He did it in 1943, playing for the Washington Redskins again versus the Detroit Lions on November 14, 1943. He had 4 interceptions. So these are just a few interesting stats, something out of the ordinary. And like I said, I find some of them completely fascinating, either for the fact that so many people have reached a certain mark but not been able to get over it, or the fact, as I said, one of the ones I'm most boggled by, honestly, not so much the interceptions, because like I said, with the rule changes, it makes it so difficult for the defensive players to ever reach some of these interception totals. But what the most fascinating one to me, I think, is the most passing yards in a single game, which, like I said, was set in 1951, 74 years ago. I'm really shocked that that record has not been broken. And I fully expect, with some of the passing quarterbacks we have and some of the teams that just throw the ball around, I do think that someday that particular record will get broken, though it hasn't yet. But you think sooner or later somebody's going to get there. All right, that was just a little out of the norm look at some statistical records of the NFL. So my next episode of Just Stats NFL, I'll be looking at the Washington Commanders of the NFC East, second place team there. Very interesting. They gave the Philadelphia Eagles one of their losses, so they're a tough team. I don't think anybody, maybe somebody did, but I haven't really heard it, that expected the Washington Commanders to be so good last year. I mean, they came close to going all the way. I mean, in their new quarterback, new coach, very fascinating that they did so well. So how will they fare in 2025? That'll be interesting. But we'll look at the team, look at some of their stats, and see what made them so good in the past season. We only have a couple of months before the start of the season, so I'll be able to get through all the teams in the NFC and be done with that team-by-team look. And then we'll be moving into the regular season and looking at the stats of the games as they're being played. But if you want to look at your favorite team from the AFC, or if you want to look at the career stats of players, whether it was career, season, or game, go back and listen to some of my past podcasts. Appreciate you listening. If you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Facebook, X, Instagram at Just the Stats NFL. I appreciate it if you would like this podcast or especially subscribe to it. That helps, and I appreciate that. So that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So until next time, I am out.